Cairo, Seattle.
It's time to get schooled with the professor, John Clayton.
Welcome to Schooled with the Professor, and we are talking dynasties. And we've now witnessed over 17 years, and we've got to kind of put it in perspective where the dynasty of the New England Patriots rank. And joining us right now is Mike Reiss from ESPN.com, who's pretty much been through a lot of this dynasty. And, Mike, you had the pleasure, like I did. I covered the Steelers in the 70s. You're covering the Patriots for the longest time now. Where would you rank the Patriots dynasty in comparison to others?
Well, it's a good question, John, and I would say, it's hard for me because I didn't live through, the Steelers one that you talk about. The thing that stands out to me the most, as it relates to the Patriots is just the era, the salary cap era, where, this whole structure is designed to create parity. This is not supposed to happen in the salary cap era. Every team has a turnover. A good example would be this year. I think 25 players on the current team that were on the Super Bowl winning team from 2 years prior. So it's the ability to keep this thing going with so many moving parts that separates it from the other dynasties, if you will.
Yeah, no question. But I guess, for longevity, this compares, it may top or equal San Francisco and the 49ers, but half of that length of time had to go in a non-salary cap era because, from 1981, you had Plan B free agency toward the end of the 80s. So that started chipping away, and they were able to come back with Steve Young and George Seifert and tack on more Super Bowls. But it's still, this one's purely in the salary cap era, which causes so much change and makes it tougher.
It makes it tougher, and, I think one of the things when we use the word longevity that stands out to me is Tom Brady, right? I mean, he is where it starts when you think about the people involved in this thing alongside Bill Belichick, and I think you probably should mention the owner, Robert Kraft, just in terms of those three pieces being in place. But Tom Brady, at age 39, normally you'd think, okay, you get to this stage. Like, for example, I remember when the Broncos finally won that Super Bowl with John Elway, and what was the storyline at the time, John, in the late 90s? It was, they finally got the running game to help him, to take the load off him so it didn't all have to be on him at that point in his career. Well, this was all on Tom Brady. They spread the field in this game, and they were throwing it, and the hits he was taking, the pressure he was under, he stands out as, this guy's as good as he's ever been, even as he's reached an age where that's not supposed to be the case.
Oh, no question. And it's amazing to think that, and again, I think what it did prove, and that's what I liked about this whole thing, because one thing that's a beauty of football and sports in general, you can have some closure to debate. And again, it's always going to be good for the debate and all that stuff. But the closure is now that Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, 5-2, put them in the hierarchy of where they are, whether it's Brady is the greatest quarterback ever, Bill Belichick is the best coach ever. But the fact that they got the 5 clarifies how good this run has been, and they can still add to it.
They can still add to it. I mean, they're in great position going forward in terms of salary cap space and core of the team. I mean, coordinators, head coach coming back, all that stuff. And so you talk about closure, and I think that's a really good word for this on multiple layers for the Patriots. Number one is closure for the fans, John. Their first 3 Super Bowls, they had people questioning, well, how much did the videotaping have to do with it? And so their fans, John, had to answer questions to that. Then they get so close in 07 and 11 with the Giants, but they can't get over the hump. They finally get it in 14. So they finally can say they think they're getting closure, and then what happens? Deflategate, right? And they have to answer to that for 2 more years. Now they get one, and they get one with no questions asked. No one can say anything, about it. So I think the closure for the fans is a big part of this story. And I guess if you want to look at it from the perspective of Belichick and Brady, you could say the same thing.
No question. And that's what I think is the beauty of them being able to do this and being able to accomplish it. And you look back, how does it happen? Because in fact, I was flying back from Houston, and I was starting to look and say, okay, how good is this team historically? And what you look at it and say, okay, how many Hall of Famers are going to come out of this 17 years? It's obviously going to be Belichick. It's obviously going to be Tom Brady. And then you say, okay, Ty Law, he has a chance and probably will make it. Rob Gronkowski, maybe. But is there anybody else? And you kind of say, no. They've been able to maybe go through this entire time, and you can add to anybody you think should be in the Hall of Fame that's on that team. A couple guys like role players, like, little spots by Randy Moss, but not many Hall of Famers on that team.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I might have missed that. I mean, Adam Vinatieri would be,
right.
In the discussion. But here's the thing, John, and I think that, we can measure it by Hall of Famers and great players, but really, when we talk about this salary cap era, it's about building the complete team, and it goes back to that 0-1 Super Bowl against the Rams when they got introduced as a team. And really, that's what they're all about. They're about the team more than, the top-of-the-line Hall of Famers. And the best example is what we just witnessed with one of the stars of the game, James White. He was a fourth-round pick out of Wisconsin in 2014 who wasn't even active in the Super Bowl win over the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, he wasn't active. I will emphasize that point. And look at the development that he had as a mid-round draft choice from that point to this game, and to deliver, what he delivered when the stakes were highest. What does that say about, one, him, two, the program that he's in with this team and how they develop players? It's a mindset. It's a mentality. I've watched them, May, June, running the hills behind their practice field to develop a mental and physical toughness and edge. If you're going to beat this team, you have to knock them out. It's probably their most admirable characteristic. They never, ever seem to, give it up. And I think it's remarkable to watch.
Well, and I think what's also remarkable to watch, not just what they do on the field, but what Bill Belichick does during a course of a year. Because, here it is, you figure, I've got a 39-year-old quarterback. I'm going to give him every resource, and this team is going to load up and try to get this Super Bowl. And yet, he traded arguably his two best defensive players, Chandler Jones in the offseason, Jamie Collins right at the trade deadline. And what did he get? Okay, so he got a starting guard in a trade down and moving around. He gets Malcolm Mitchell, who's a promising wide receiver. He now gets a third-round compensatory from Cleveland for Jamie Collins, and you can anticipate he's going to get a second-round pick and something else for Jimmy Garoppolo. So all of a sudden, here's a guy, Bill Belichick, that's willing to take away two of his best defensive players, saying, I'll still win the Super Bowl, but I'm going to start to make the moves to get the next run.
And a couple other things he received in those trades, John, that I'm going to mention, and it's nothing that's tangible, all right? The first thing he received cap space, right? So he's able to build other parts of his roster. So, you could argue that Chris Long, who played probably his best game as a Patriot in the Super Bowl, drawing that critical holding penalty in the fourth quarter that helped knock the Falcons out of field goal range, he was able to sign him with some of the saved money and other players. That's the first thing. And the second thing he got out of that is behind the scenes, he obviously felt that Jamie Collins wasn't going along with what they wanted in the program. So he's got 52 guys or however many guys going in one direction, and he felt like here's one of his most talented players, but there was something missing there. So by trading him, what did Bill Belichick gain? Well, he gained the fact that he sent a message to his locker room that said, we got to all be pulling in the same direction, all putting in the same level of work, and they rally together and they do that. And so I think sometimes we look at these moves in a vacuum and say, oh, it was this for this. But there's so many more layers to the analysis when you consider what it means to be part of a team and the culture you're trying to establish within your team. And I think that's an important part of the conversation as well.
Oh, no question. And that's what I'm able to pull together. And also, and you chart this as well as anybody else, it seems like he's done this now so long that he'll start the chapter of a book, change it around in the middle of the season, and then finally sometime by November he figures out exactly what he has and what he's going to do with it. But each year is going to be different.
It is, and great examples this year, offensively and defensively. I mean, when they traded for Martellus Bennett, I mean, it was obvious what they were trying to do. They were going to be a two tight end offense. Why would you take Rob Gronkowski and Martellus Bennett off the field? I mean, those are two of the best tight ends in the league. Well, Gronkowski isn't healthy. All of a sudden, you got to reinvent yourself on offense. And what did they do in the Super Bowl? I mean, they were a 3-4 wide receiver team in the Super Bowl. So a good example of how they reinvent themselves on the fly from a personnel perspective and defensively. I mean, man, that picture was ever evolving over the course of the season in terms of who's the number 2 corner opposite of Malcolm Butler. They trade for Eric Rowe. They trade for linebacker Kyle Van Noy. And so that, they're trying different guys in and out. You had your top pick from last year, Malcolm Brown, defensive tackle, was demoted at one point in the year. So many different, Rob Ninkovich was suspended for the first 4 games of the year, all those different things. And, you're moving around, you're experimenting, doing different things. And then you get to the end of the year and you say, this is what we have. This is what I feel the most comfortable with. Let's go with this.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I think is so understated is how far ahead Bill Belichick is offensively. Now, again, he can do it because it's got Tom Brady compared to everybody else, because everybody in the NFL has that fear factor. Spread quarterbacks, spread offenses, and yet, like 10 years ago or so, it was Bill Belichick who trades for Wes Welker, puts in what would be the air raid internal wide receiver routes, letting Wes Welker do it, and then he's ahead of the game there with a little bit of a spread. And then, of course, a couple years ago, he goes to Oregon, gets some stuff out of Chip Kelly, runs the Oregon running attack. I mean, he's running college stuff that hardly anybody else in this league is running, and he's doing it now.
So the whole concept, those that aren't as familiar with the Patriots, is to be a game plan offense. So the idea is every week you start the week by studying your opponent and saying, okay, this is what they do defensively. Here's their personnel. Here's their personnel strengths and weaknesses. Here's what we have, and let's morph our attack. Let's change our attack each week to try to exploit what we perceive to be the opponent's weaknesses. So, for example, we want to pound the ball and be a run team in this game, let's say against the Indianapolis Colts from the past years, when we remember Jonas Gray having a big game on the ground, or Garrett Blunt, some of his big games when they're a power running team. Okay, that's one week. But then you look at the next week, John, you say we want to be a spread team, a passing team. We feel like that's the best way to beat the Atlanta Falcons in Super Bowl 51. So you do that. It's an ever-evolving attack. So when you're on the other sideline and you're preparing your team to face the Patriots, you never quite know what you're going to get, because there's no consistent theme throughout the year other than this. The only thing that changes is that there's always change. You know what I mean? So it's a pretty ambitious and approach. Like you said, having Tom Brady is a nice place to start to help to try to pull that off.
Let's talk Tom Brady now, because the word's starting to come out that he wants to play 3 to 5 years. It's pretty evident by the moves that Belichick's made over the course of 2016. He anticipates at least maybe 3 years. So can that happen, and how can that happen?
So how can it happen? Number one, he said that, the things, his priorities in his life are to be the best football player he can be and his family. So he lives 365 days a year for this. Quarterbacks that reach this stage of their careers, the Marinos, the Elways, the Favres, go down the line, they'll often say, look, I wanted to do it on Sunday. Like, Sunday was easy for me, but it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Saturday, stop it. That was the hard part. It was preparing. It was all the stuff with your body and getting to that point to get to Sunday. That was the hard part. Brady embraces it. He loves that stuff. Still loves it. It's not a drain to him. So that's the first sign to me that says, yeah, he can go ahead and do this. Now, you do say father time, you can't outrace father time. Eventually, it's going to catch up to you. But man, John, he's doing a good job holding it off right now. And there's one guy I say I never bet against. It's Tom Brady.
Oh, no question. And so, I mean, if he goes, because here's the see if you follow what I think is going to happen. Because of as you mentioned, there's 15 free agents, they probably lose 7 or 8 of those. So there'll be a little bit of a younger team next year, and probably a team that can go back to a championship game. But if they get the wrong matchup against, say, Pittsburgh or somebody else, maybe they won't go to the Super Bowl. But I would anticipate with those young guys that are being developed, by 2018 or 2019, they're going to be Super Bowl ready again.
Well, I mean, they're a contender. I mean, right now, and part of that, John, and this is something I maybe misevaluated at the start of the year. I mean, I thought it was a down year for the league as a whole. Like, there weren't just a lot of quality teams, in my opinion.
I agree.
So that helps. So that helps, John, right? I mean, it's not just we're laser focused looking at them, but then widen the scope and say, well, who are we comparing them against? You know what I mean? Like, they're as good as anyone right now for 2017 and 18 going forward. Going to be compelling to see what happens with the backup quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't think they're going to give him away, but if teams are interested and willing to deal with him, and that starts with a first-round pick, I don't think that'll be enough. I think they'll need more than just a first-round pick to deal him, because I think they view him as being valuable insurance for them, in the event something does happen to Tom Brady. So I think that's going to be a compelling storyline to follow. But I agree with you. They're right there with everyone else, that you'd consider a contender, and you could argue that they're in a better position than anyone else.
Oh, no question. I mean, the reason I don't think it's going to be, because you look at the teams up in the top 5 that need quarterbacks. I mean, I think it's just going to be tough for them to give up one of those players, and that's why I look instead of like a Sam Bradford deal, I look at it more as an Alex Smith deal. Because second round pick can be a starter in a year or two for Bill Belichick, and he'll get a 3, probably they can upgrade to a 2, and maybe he can get a 1 out of that on the back end.
Yep, exactly. Like, so the idea would be, okay, we didn't get a 1, which is what we were hoping for, if not more, but let's make it a conditional pick, because let's say you trade him and he plays the way you hope he'll play. Well, that would be worth a 1 to you, so maybe it could be a conditional 1 2 years down the line.
Mike, congratulations on being able to, because again, I know what it was being able to cover the Steelers. You get to cover the Patriots, and of course it still continues. So batten down the hatches and watch it flow.
Well, you know what, John? I didn't do anything. I don't deserve any congratulations. I'm just glad I stopped shaking at the end of that game, because the way it was going down, it was like I got to keep my thoughts straight here. That was just such a scintillating ending.
It really was. Hey, Mike, thanks for joining us.
All right, thanks for having me, John.
That's it for this week's edition of Schooled. You can follow me on Twitter at Clayton ESPN. Thanks for listening. Class dismissed.